Welcome to this month's GKW Safety Training Meeting. This month we are talking about specifically scaffolds, ladders, and lifts. Why is this important? Because scaffolding accidents account for 4,500 injuries, including 50 deaths each year. These deaths come from falls from the scaffolding or being struck by either the scaffolding or something dropped off the scaffolding. Here is a picture of a scaffolding collapse that happened in China and killed 74 people. China doesn't have OSHA. These guidelines save lives. Another reason why we're looking at this is because the incident that happened when a worker fell 30 feet. Fall prevention was in place and fall protection was also provided. He fell while planking a hydromobile scaffolding. He suffered a 9-inch laceration and soft tissue damage. Toxicology later showed that he was impaired. He was terminated for working while intoxicated. So our training objectives come from OSHA 119.26, which is the construction standards, subpart L. We're going to talk about scaffolding setup, fall hazards, falling object hazards, electrical hazards, and then the do's and don'ts of scaffolding. We're going to apply what we're learning about scaffolding across to ladders and lifts. Setup must be designed by a qualified person, and is someone who is trained or experienced and has demonstrated the ability to design safe scaffolding. Setup must be done by a competent person. A competent person is someone who knows the hazards, who can anticipate the hazards, and knows how to stop hazardous activities before anyone gets hurt. Before you set up your scaffolding, look up. Look for electrical hazards, for physical hazards, and structures that may be in the way. Make sure you have a firm foundation when you set up your scaffolding. It has to be plumb and level. Your foundation must be strong and rigid, and it has to be solid. If you are putting your scaffolding on grass, you need to have sills on the bottom, or mud sills if it's loose or potentially loose soil. Build each level one at a time. Your height to base cannot exceed 4 to 1. With our 5-foot masonry frames, you could put 4 frames together to create a 20-foot high scaffolding before you put outriggers or tie on to secure it. But if you have added screw jacks or wheels, the 4 to 1 ratio still applies. A scaffold with screw jacks or wheels with 4 frames would be over 20 feet high and would need outriggers or tying. All working levels on scaffolding must be fully planked. Walkways need to be 18 inches wide with less than a 1-inch gap between planks. Each must be able to reach work within 14 inches, the extension of your arm from elbow to fingers. And work can only be done 10 inches below a platform. If you have to reach farther down, move down. Understand the weight-bearing limitations of your scaffolding. Peri-scaffolding, with just a single frame, your person and materials total is 1,000 pounds, or 25 pounds per square foot uniformly placed across the span. On masonry scaffolding, person and materials is 2,000 pounds, that's 50 pounds per square foot. And the higher you go, the less your load capacity. For every you go upwards, you have to subtract 15% of your load capacity. At 2 frames high, you're at 1,700 pounds of person and materials. We work with hydromobile scaffolding, which is a mobile-powered scaffolding setup. The different series of hydromobiles have different weight ratings. As you add extra masts, you gain 80% more weight bearing. But as you add extra widths, you lose 1% of your weight bearing per foot that you add. Now let's talk about fall hazards. Fall hazards include falling from heights, collapse hazards, planking hazards, and weather conditions. 1/3 of all construction-related deaths are from falling. 1/4 of that is less than 10 feet. Just falling from stairs kills 12,000 people per year. Falling more than 30 feet only accounts for another 1/4 of those deaths. So half of the fall deaths in construction in the United States are a fall between 10 and 30 feet. Fall protection is required whenever you are 10 foot above landing. This would catch you while falling and would slow your descent. Consider the ABCs of fall protection. Anchorage. This is the place to which you are attaching yourself. The body harness is the harness that is fitting onto your torso to keep you from falling. Connection connects the body harness to the anchorage. On that connection, there will be a deceleration lanyard. The deceleration lanyard slows your descent within 3.5 feet, so you don't come to an abrupt jerk at the end of the connection. Also consider an escape plan. Should you fall and be hanging, how would you get down? Your fall protection always needs to be inspected before use. Any tears or frays in the fall protection straps render them unusable. Fall prevention begins at 6 feet above landing. All sides except the side facing the wall being laid need fall protection. Your top rail on your fall prevention must have a 200-pound weight capacity. Your top rail can be between 38 to 45 inches, and the bottom rail must be halfway below the top. Frames and braces can function as rails as long as they fit within that 38 to 45 inch zone. And never use equipment to support scaffolding. Don't use a forklift to lift scaffolding. Let's talk about collapse hazards. The tipping moment is when force is applied to either the side or to overloading one side of the scaffolding, causing it to fall over. Wind is one example of a force that could be applied to the side of a scaffold, causing a tipping moment. Climbing on the exterior of your scaffolding is an example of overloading one side. When you set counterweights on scaffold, counterweights cannot be flowable material. You cannot use sand, gravel, or water as a counterweight. Counterweights also cannot be unused construction material, because as you use the construction material, the counterweight effect would be diminished. And always exit your scaffolding before moving it. Avoid using scaffolding during adverse weather. Wind at 20 miles per hour or more, you must check with a qualified person, such as the person who designed the scaffolding, as to whether it would be safe to work on the scaffolding. Never work on scaffolding during high winds or thunderstorms. Wet planking is also a hazard, as ice on the boards could cause slip. Use sand to create traction on wet or icy scaffold board. Whenever there's a falling object hazard, hard hats are required. If materials might fall off the scaffolding, tow boards must be attached to the sides of the scaffold to stop those materials from falling off. Also, a restricted access zone would be needed underneath the scaffolding to keep passers-by from having materials or tools which might fall off strike them. Use a tool bag or a tether to carry your tools. Electrical hazards. Whenever the power is less than 300 volts, such as a power cord or extension cord, you must keep at least 3 feet away. You can either move the power cord or move your scaffolding. When there's an electrical power line of more than 300 volts, you need to keep 10 feet away. At 20 feet to the electrical hazard, begin to take action to prevent contact with the electrical source. Electricity can jump, and it only takes half of an amp of electricity to stop your heart. Now let's look at the do's and don'ts of scaffolding. Inspect your scaffold daily. Inspect the planking and the work platform. Look for broken, cracked, split, or gaps. Check for rust and weakening of scaffolding. Keep your scaffolding clear of obstructions. Keep all guardrails complete. Do wear PPE. Wear your hard hats, your safety shoes, your eye protection, your personal fall protection. Don't climb cross braces. Cross braces are not designed to hold weight. Cross braces cannot be used to climb up or down on scaffolding. Do not climb or stand on safety rails. Do not stockpile materials or overload your scaffolding with materials. Do not ride rolling scaffold. When putting on your personal fall protection, make sure there are no objects in your pockets which would be trapped against your body in the case of a fall. Now let's wrap up looking at the application of these standards to ladders and lifts. Any step over 2 feet requires a ladder. Any fixed ladder over 24 feet from a landing requires a cage to cover the back of the ladder. Use caution when using metal ladders, as they expose the user to electrical hazards. Wooden ladders are discouraged because, as they age, they become less durable. Fiberglass and plastic ladders are always preferred, as they are non-conductive. Keep a 4-to-1 rule on the height versus the lean of the ladder. For every 4 feet the ladder goes up, have the ladder 1 foot away from the structure. Stand at the base of the ladder with your arms straight out. Your feet are touching the ladder and your tips of your fingers are touching the ladder. You are probably within the 4-to-1 rule. At the top, your ladder must clear the landing space by 3 feet, and always secure the ladder. Tie the top of the ladder to your access point and make sure your foundation of your ladder is level at the bottom. Always use a ladder as it was designed, and always use the right ladder for the job. Maintain 3 points of contact on the ladder. That means you cannot carry something and ascend a ladder, as 1 point of contact would be needed to carry a tool. When you're on a ladder, don't turn away from the ladder. Don't lean away from the ladder to do work. Don't jump the ladder to move it side to side. Don't put 2 people on the ladder at the same time. Don't use a ladder on top of a scaffold or lift, and never allow your knees to go above the top of a stepladder. Lifts are considered mobile scaffolding. Any height on a lift requires personal fall protection. Adjusting, planking, or servicing mobile scaffolding requires personal fall protection. Scissor lifts, however, do not require fall protection, as if a scissor lift were to fall, the fall protection might do more harm than good. Remain conscious of the lever action of the lift. As the lift moves outwards, its ability to hold weight is diminished. Now let's review. Scaffold hazards can kill you. There are 50 scaffolding deaths in construction each year from falls and struck by hazard. Scaffolding must be designed by a qualified person. Scaffold must be inspected daily. Fall protection and fall prevention must be inspected daily. Scaffold fall prevention begins at 6 feet from the nearest landing. Scaffold fall protection begins at 10 feet from the nearest landing. So if you are 10 feet above the landing, or if you are adjusting planking, you would need tied off. Never use cross braces to support any portion of your weight. Keep at least 10 feet away from power lines that are above 300 volts. Keep 3 points of contact when climbing. This applies to ladders or climbing scaffolding. Each hand or foot is a point of contact. If you have a tool in a hand, it cannot be a point of contact with the ladder or scaffold. PPE are required on scaffold: hard hats, safety shoes, and fall protection. This is the end of this safety training. Go to the following link, answer the questions, record your attendance. If you were unclear about one of the questions, you can even rewatch the video while answering the questions. Thank you for attending this month's GKW Safety Training Meeting.